Thank you for joining us, and happy 2025. I'm Armstrong Williams, and welcome to the new year. Well, the buzz for America and the world is the upcoming presidential inauguration, which is less than 2 weeks away. And Donald Trump, in a very historic way, is being sworn in to complete his second term. It's almost unprecedented. And so what about the cabinet and the role they will play in reshaping government and his commitments to forgive and pardon the January 6ers the day after he's sworn in on January 20th? And what will his FBI director and Department of Justice new cabinet secretary does? And what will he do that will change foreign policy? And how will he change the lives of so many Americans who've sort of found the peace during the holidays, thinking that Donald Trump can restore financial stability and make America that shining city upon that hill again? Well, I've attended every inauguration since Jimmy Carter. That means I'm ancient. I'm centuries old, which is okay. I don't look it. But anyhow, I always remember the procession to the Capitol. Because traditionally what happens is that the outgoing president accompanies the incoming president to the Capitol for the swearing-in ceremony. You see that early on Monday morning where everybody just waiting for the Bidens to show up and pass the batons, then they all ride together. And the presidents and vice presidents swearing in is just the ceremonies. I mean, the incoming president and vice president will both recite the oath of office per Article 2, Section 1 of the U.S. Constitution, officially making the beginning of their term. I remember some of the great inaugural addresses. I remember President Obama's, I remember Bush's, and I remember Aretha Franklin in that wonderful hat singing at President Obama's inauguration. And so the inaugural address, the new president will deliver a speech likely highlighting the goals, many of which Trump has stated on what he wants to do, and he's talked about his vision for not only the next 4 years, but he's already a lame duck president. Think about that. So he owes no one nothing, so there are really no excuses why he cannot at least attempt to honor all the promises that he had made to you, the people. And then there is this honorary departure. The outgoing president, the Bidens, and First Lady Jill leave the Capitol to begin their post-presidential lives. They will get on that helicopter. You will see that scene. Their era is over. Pass and review. The new president will stand on the east front steps of the Capitol to review military troops before leading a procession of ceremonial military regiments, citizens groups, marching bands, and floats down Pennsylvania Avenue to the White House. And everyone knows if you've come to Washington, D.C. from the White House to Pennsylvania Avenue, to Constitution Avenue, they're already building the bleachers. The bleachers will be in place. You'll be sitting out in the bloody cold, because I'm going to tell you this, it will be one of the coldest days of the year. I cannot think of an inauguration that I've attended and it was not the coldest day. I remember Reagan's inauguration was canceled. It was so bloody cold they had to cancel it. But anyhow, to talk about the president-elect and the pending inauguration and the cabinet, and this is a festive show today. We're going to start the new year off in a festive way because we want our president to do well. The world is watching. We're going to wonder what heads of state will be in attendance. I'm sure after President-elect Donald Trump attended the opening of Notre Dame with President Macron, I'm sure if he's still in power, he will be in attendance. But listen, you've heard enough from me. Joining us to discuss this, our political editor at the Baltimore Sun, which I am an owner, Ken Woodall. Welcome back to the show. Joe Paul, Executive Director of Black Men Vote. And of course, Tyler O'Neill from that famous Heritage Foundation. And they're still talking about that manifesto that they've written, and they're going to have all this influence on the Trump administration. And already you can see it in cabinet selections. They're all tied and authored these documents. Whatever. But anyhow, let me start with Ms. Woodall, who's the chief political editor at the Baltimore Sun. I mean, you've covered so many of these events. What does this mean in terms of this inauguration with the already lamed up president and this guy, Donald, completing his second and last term? Oh, let me start with, I'm sorry. There are always technical things, but we keep moving. Let me just start with my man from the Heritage Foundation, since I called them out a little bit. Give us your take as Ms. Woodall turned her mic on.
Yeah, so I think this is a historic moment on so many different levels. Not only have we not seen a president leave office and then return to office since the days of Grover Cleveland, that was in the 1800s for those who are keeping score, but we also have in this president a man who survived an assassination attempt by, a tenth of an inch, and who went on not only to lean in when his supporters were being called garbage, and he went in to a garbage truck, but also going to McDonald's and being the consummate man of the people. I mean, this was a moment that will go down in the history books because Donald Trump is the guy who's always in a suit, who's always like big businessman, and yet he condescended, he put on that McDonald's uniform and handed out French fries. And I mean, some people were saying this is a stunt. It was a stunt, but I think it really nailed home the fact that Trump sees himself, and I think everyday Americans see him as an everyday American. He is just like the men and women who have been struggling over the past 4 years. And so this great redemption, comeback story is really inspiring. But I do want to address, I mean, you mentioned Project.
Oh, no. We're gonna get to that. No. We're gonna get to that. I'm gonna try Candy again. We have plenty of time. Candy, can we hear you now? We can. Okay. So obviously, Joe Paul, Tyler has so much excitement. I must admit, being a member of the media class, I like it when Americans have hope. They believe that this man, whether it comes to foreign policy, domestic policy, that he is the leader that America needs at this moment. As we think about the inauguration and all his cabinet secretaries having their impact on this country and the world, how do you believe Trump's administration will address the ongoing economic challenges of this year, especially concerning inflation and unemployment?
Well, I'll tell you, that's a fantastic question. And again, thanks for having me, Armstrong. Donald Trump is going to have an uphill battle. It's going to be really, really tough to address the economic disparities in the country. I mean, concerning inflation and unemployment. Coming in, he's going to literally have to step a little away from the tariffs because, from my perspective, even a 10% tariff on Mexico or Canada, while it will generate billions of dollars, it will cost us even more. It'll trickle right down to the consumers. And so that means people will be paying even more for their goods and services. So he's going to have a lot of an uphill battle, I think, to address the economic situation in America. But I do believe, honestly, and I'm one of those hopeful optimistics, I do believe that Donald Trump has the country behind him. We do want to know that even whether you voted for Donald Trump or not, we support our president, right? And so no matter who that person is. And so he's going to have a lot of people who's on his side, regardless who the secretaries are. These secretaries are surrounded by well-capable people. And so I think that he does have an uphill battle, but he'll be able to address it.
What are your best inaugural memories, Joe?
You know, I remember Bill Clinton being inaugurated. I remember President Obama being inaugurated.
You were probably 5 when Bill Clinton was inaugurated, though.
I was a little older than 5, but I was 6.
Oh, wow.
I was 6.
I was close.
But you know,
Please.
I remember Barack Obama's first term, and just standing in that cold air and everybody just witnessing history, being a part of history. You know, I believe our country probably was the most unified at that time.
Really?
I believe so. I mean, there are folks who, because Barack Obama ran on hope and faith, right? And a lot of folks, and just like Donald Trump, he ran on hope. Like, give me back the realm, and I will show you exactly how to do this. And so I remember folks were just, you know, just together and excited about what was ahead. So that stands out. And I remember just people being packed in like sardines. But it was an incredible experience just to be there and to witness history.
Before Tyler, you start talking about that, whatever, I don't even know the name of that manifesto anymore, which is good news. Talk about your favorite memories over the history of your attending inaugurations, which left an impression for you.
Well, so I haven't actually attended many inaugurations.
Have you
but I
attended
have
any?
attended the March for Life.
Wait a minute, hold
many
on.
years.
Wait a minute.
And
Let me stop. Let me stop
the
you.
March
No,
for
no,
Life
let me
is
stop you.
colder.
Let me stop you. Did you notice what he just said? He's manipulating me. I have not attended many inaugurations. The question is, have you attended any? Huh?
So I came briefly to cover news and interview people around
The answer is no.
the 2016
Okay.
and 2020.
The answer is no.
I've
It's
never,
okay.
no,
It's
I've
okay.
never
You have
really
not. Yeah.
attended. So it would be great to actually attend this one. I'm not entirely sure what the schedule is at this point. If I don't know now, I'm probably not going to make it to this one either. But it's going to be an extremely historic moment.
And why have you never attended?
Normally, it's just been what I need to do at the time. I mean, you know, you guys talk about Obama's inauguration. I was in high school in Colorado. Then you go to Obama's second inauguration, and I had just graduated. I was still in college, and then, you know, fast forward to Trump. I was starting to do journalism out here. I was busy working, and I don't think I was on the team to cover
it's so
the
wonderful seeing
inauguration.
Tyler O'Neill.
So it's like one thing to another
It's
to another,
so
just
wonderful
not having
seeing
the
you
opportunity.
search for words and trying to figure out what to say. This has to be an absolute first. Let me save you by going to break, okay? Happy New Year, everybody. We'll be back. Don't go away. Oh, my goodness. He had absolutely nothing. We're back. Happy New Year with our all-star lineup. Robert Patillo, you are in the house. It's always a pleasure to look at you. I mean, you look like the new year.
Thanks so much.
Trying
to be like you when I grow up.
We got to give our brothers love.
That's
okay?
Right. That's right.
Okay. So, Robert, what are your most treasured inaugural memories?
Well, you know, back in 2008, you know, that was kind of the pivotal moment. I was in law school in Chicago. So when President Obama won, we went to Grant Park and everybody was crying and the speeches and the children, you know, Michelle in the dress. And so we all decided in our law school class of black law students that we would get together and road trip from Chicago to Washington, D.C. for the Obama inauguration. You know, we're college students. We ain't got no money. We're staying with friends. This is like at the beginning of the internet, so there's no social media, those sorts of things. We're phone calling around trying to find restaurants. If anybody remembers 2008, it is freezing cold that morning for inauguration, but getting to see the first ever black president inaugurated is a cherished memory. And even now, talking to some of my nieces and nephews who they learned about this in high school, it's crazy saying that I was there for that moment. So it's probably my most treasured memory.
You know, so let me stay with you. How big of it, you know, listen, this is something that we don't talk about enough. There are many agencies. I don't think people realize there may be over 200 agencies, government agencies, in the federal system. But there are some agencies that are far more consequential than others. The Department of Justice is consequential. Yeah. The Department of Defense is consequential. The Secretary of State is consequential. So whatever you want to say. So how important, so let me come to you with this, Robert. How do President Trump's cabinet picks signal his priorities for the next 4 years, particularly at the Department of Justice? Let me also say this. The FBI is consequential. Mm-hmm. What does it say, Robert?
Well, I think what has to happen is he has to ensure, if his agenda is to bring back fairness to our Department of Justice, to bring back non-political leadership, as he has said. And I think there's a lot of things that we need to be looking into. We have to look into those civil rights files. I want to see what the files were on Dr. King, on Malcolm X, on Huey P. Newton. I think we have to look into some of the prosecutions of black political prisoners, in many cases who have either been exiled or unjustly prosecuted for decades. And we have to look at what our federal government did to stop many movements that were meant to uplift African Americans. I think if he starts with that, you will see a ground, more so than any barbershop talk or any platinum plan, if you release what the federal government did to African American communities during the Hoover administration of the FBI, then I think you will see the American people coming together to understand that he truly is trying to attack the deep state. But if it just turns into political prosecution, witch hunts, grinding axes against people who have been political opponents of his, then I think we'll fall into the same partisan divide. He has an opportunity. He's coming in tabula rasa for many people, that he can have a blank slate where he can carve his own future and destiny. So I'm hoping he'll take that opportunity.
Tyler, how much of an impact and influence will the Heritage Foundation have on these agencies?
Well, that is an excellent question. I think that remains to be seen. What we saw, Project 2025, which is the name of that
well, we're in
project
2025. That's why it's more than a project
yes,
now.
so now we're in it. So it's Project Now. Project 2025 represented a broad swath of the conservative movement coming together with many different policy suggestions. And we've seen President-elect Trump nominate many of those who were involved in that effort. I'm thinking Russell Vought at the Office of Management and Budget in particular, but many of them have been brought into the administration. Many who were involved in that effort have not been brought into the administration. So it really remains to be seen. I think what we saw on the campaign trail is the Trump that you're going to get. I mean, you're talking about a man who is passionate about making life better for the American people, who is passionate about addressing problems like inflation, about fixing the Department of Justice and preventing the sort of deep state actions that we saw in Trump's first term from dogging his second term. And I don't think we're going to see the same sort of Russia collusion hoax brought against Trump this time. I mean, I really appreciated what Robert Patillo just said about Trump having a blank slate in the minds of many voters. That is not the way that it started in 2017. And now what we've seen, he only has 4 years this time. As you said, he's a lame duck, Armstrong. But I think he's going to be a lot stronger this time than he was last time, partially because he doesn't have that, and partially because we've seen an aggressiveness from many of his cabinet picks, where these people have been prosecuted and gone after by the federal government at various times. I'm thinking of Kash Patel at the FBI, and they're actually going to clean house with a new vision of making the federal government more accountable to the people and less focused on covering up for the elites.
One thing, Joe Paul, we do understand, when I think about what Elon Musk and Vivek have been assigned to do, I mean, people need to understand, this is nothing new. The Grace Commission, General Accounting Office, they've all said they're going to get spending under control and get waste out of government. But that is a tall order and comes with huge implications, particularly when you're doing this at the same time of spending billions of dollars to deport hundreds of thousands of people. Something's going to have to give.
Something definitely is going to have to give, and there are going to be a lot of collateral damage. When you think about cleaning house, if you will, there are a lot of career appointments that are going to be affected and impacted as a result of President Trump's policies. I am curious to see how he skirts around the Project 2025 manifesto. And all throughout the election and the campaign, he had mentioned that he doesn't know what Project 25 is or what is it.
And believe him.
Well, for sure, right? If
yes,
when people tell you that they are,
no. He doesn't know, is what I'm saying. Now others may know, but he does not know.
That's a good one.
Okay.
He intentionally didn't read it. I mean, and this is something he said in a recent interview. He intentionally didn't read it so that he wouldn't know. And by the way, many of the things he had been hearing about it, he said he disagreed with, which unfortunately the legacy media had been twisting a lot of it. So I'm not surprised he disagreed with a lot of what he heard.
Well, if he didn't read it, I don't know how he can disagree.
There's not much he reads. Let's just start there, okay? He goes on instinct.
That's very true.
Let's not misrepresent the president here, making him a reader.
That's very true.
Okay.
That's very true.
All right.
I am most concerned about the career appointments and folks who work within the federal government who have been working for decades in many cases, who may be collateral damage as Vivek and Elon Musk look to quote unquote trim the fat. There's going to be a lot of folks who look like me who are going to be impacted.
Not because they look like you.
No,
come on.
No,
now.
not because they look like me.
Look like you. Come on.
Let's be clear. They just happen to look like me, but not because they look like me, but because they're trimming the fat, and that means that everyone who is in the way, and if they're not loyal to the president, will likely be affected or impacted.
So, Robert, this is an important question for you, because I've always respected your being a student of history, being a student of bureaucracy. The thing that the American people care about, Robert, and not necessarily what we talked about so far. They care about their economy, being able to pay their bills, put food on the table, put gas in the tank, being able to go to movies every now and then, take a little vacation here, and have a little extra at the end of the month. That's what they care about. How will Donald Trump's policies ensure that becomes a reality for so many Americans who voted against Biden-Harris because they say, yeah, you talk about a great economy, but it's not my economy.
Yeah, so my surprise should have asked that question like a month and a half ago, because no one ever made Trump actually explain how any of that would work. Very much he ran on this campaign of simply saying that I'm going to make it happen, but never explaining exactly how that's going to take place. If you put a 25% tariff on everything that goes to Canada and Mexico, then guess what's going to happen? They're going to have a reciprocal tariff on that. He's now talking about 100, 200, 1,000% tariffs on American companies. And when you have a reciprocal tariff along with that means that they're going to search for more fruitful markets in other places. So we're already seeing China, we're already seeing the EU trying to swoop in to make their own trade agreements with these countries that are not some primitive third world nations, but the G20 economies. And when those prices hit the American people, it's difficult to understand exactly how that's going to lower consumer prices here in America. And in addition to that, when you're looking at the cuts that we're talking about making to the federal government, Vivek Ramaswamy sent out a tweet recently saying they were going to cut things to SNAP programs, supplemental nutrition for poor families. They're going to cut government subsidies to help with housing for poor Americans. So this idea that you're going to cut your way out of this, we saw this during the Great Recession in 2008, that European nations that attempted austerity measures in order to lift themselves out of an economic decline ended up sinking deeper. You can look at Greece, you can look at Spain, but the countries that invested in economic stimulus and smart growth were able to rebound quicker than any other nations within the EU.
Let me give Tyler O'Neill a chance to respond to how Trump expects to empower the lives of those that have always seemed to be left behind, no matter who's elected to the White House.
Yeah, no, I think there are a lot of different ways that Trump's agenda is going to help strengthen the economy. I mean, we're talking about clamping down on the war on oil and gas that we've seen in the past 4 years. So it's going to, and when the price of oil drops, it doesn't just decrease that gas you're putting in your car. It also enables the cost of transporting goods across the country and even in some cases across the world to go down. And that cost savings is often passed on to the consumer. But I think it is going to be very much an uphill battle. And President Trump has many different ideas for, talking about when you're cutting waste and abuse from the federal government, you can also redirect some of those agencies, move them into the heartland, hire new people. And one of the things here, yes, I think there are a few civil service workers who might fall through the cracks. But I think what we're also seeing, I saw a report from the Washington Post, where people who are hired into the administrative state in order to forward ideas that are really linked to critical race theory, ideas that where they're focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they used to have those in their job titles. They're now scrambling to change their job titles to hide the nature of why they were hired in the first place. And I think when you get DOJ, when you get the new incoming administration that doesn't look kindly on the whole hog push of critical race theory and trying to meet all of these racial quotas everywhere, that I think there's going to be some good cutting that can easily be done by identifying people whose jobs in the federal bureaucracy were created for ideological reasons, and then hopefully clearing up room for other new civil servants who are going to be focused on what's best for the American people to join the new administration.
So, this is your voice? No, it's not your voice, it's my voice. It's the Armstrong Williams Show. You do so many shows, you get confused, and I'm human too. But anyhow, Robert, you know when we come back, we're going to give you a chance to respond. There's so much more that we have to talk about here as we celebrate the new year. Everybody's all dressed up, lost weight, mentally refreshed. I mean, I like that. Everybody's looking good, okay? And so are you, and we'll be back. I knew you were going to say something.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence. There's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. You know, Americans deserve a day, a week, a month to get away from if it bleeds, it leads, from murder, mayhem, sadness, depression, suicide. So, because people are coming off the holidays and it's 2025, what we want to do is feed you with a diet of hope, love, respect. And all of us here today want our president to succeed. Because when our president succeeds, not only does our country, but the world. Now, Candid Woodall, we heard her voice in the beginning. She finally got her whatever worked out. And she's back joining us, and there she is with her smile. She is my chief political editor at the Baltimore Sun. And for full disclosure, I'm one of the owners, and I love it. I love working with Candace. She's one of the best I've ever worked with. Much respect. And for all the rumors about the turmoil at the Baltimore Sun, you all need to go somewhere else with your negativity and your lack of information on what's going on, because we're doing just fine at the Sun, and the Sun continues to rise. Now, Candace, now that I got that out the way, a shameless plug for the Baltimore Sun, and you should definitely subscribe. I take no shame in that. Talk about your memories of the inauguration, what we should expect, and put it in an historical context for us.
Well,
no, you're gone. You're not there. We lost Kennedy. I don't know. She was talking. We had her. But anyhow, back to the men. You know it's the New Year. I can only get away with it on this day. But anyway, it's what it is. You're all a man. So let me come back to Robert Hillard. What gives you hope that will be different in this Trump administration that was lacking in the Biden-Harris? That gives you some hope.
Well, what I do think we're going to see is that President Trump has to get things done this time. As has been mentioned, he is a lame duck president from day one. He cannot run for re-election. So this idea of kicking cans down the road, I think that we're probably going to get out of that. We've been trying to pass comprehensive immigration reform since 1986 in this country. We've been kicking the can down the road for nearly 40 years on this issue. We've seen open borders. We've seen build the wall. Maybe we can come someplace in the middle and actually get things done on this issue. I think on the size of government aspect of it, most Americans believe that we spend entirely too much money on wasted things. I think if most people understood it, we spend $13 billion on aircraft carriers, that we have B-2 bombers that cost $2 billion a piece and cost over $1 million an hour to operate them. I think that we can start, the people understood that we audit the Pentagon every year and they fail every year because money just goes directly into the defense contractors' pockets, and those are the people who run Washington, D.C. I think most people will start saying, well, look, we have to be breaking these things down and getting money back to the American people. So I think there are places for bipartisan agreement if we can get to a place where we're not just simply at loggerheads, stop saying that the people on the other side of the aisle are Nazis or that they're pedophiles, and actually get to some actual policy agreements, and then we can actually get things done in this next Congress.
Tyler, hold me up. What gives you great hope as it relates to foreign policy that was lacking during Biden and Harris, that you find that really may restore America to foreign policy prominence, respect, and trust?
Oh my, where do I even begin? I mean, as Trump has said over and over again, we didn't see the Russian invasion of Ukraine under his watch. And we did see it under both Obama's watch and Biden's watch. And so I think what we're going to see, and many people say that Trump's strategy with NATO undermines our alliances abroad. I think it actually encourages strength for the American side. The way that Trump has pressured NATO countries to put more money into their own defense helps Europe to be a stronger ally for the United States so that they can help in their own defense and not just rely on the United States. So I'm looking for another 4 years of mostly what we saw in his previous 4 years, but even stronger, especially when it comes to Israel. We had the historic Abraham Accords that came at the end of Trump's first term. Thankfully, even though the Biden administration loosened the sanctions on Iran and enabled Iran to become more of a threat to Israel and other countries in the region, leading to the October 7th terrorist attacks, leading to a great deal of war in the Middle East, they kept a lot of the parts of those critical Abraham Accords deals. And I think now that Trump is going to be re-entering the White House, he'll be able to build on that foundation. We might see more Arab countries coming into normalization with Israel, and we'll hopefully see Iran further battered back and defensive, and hopefully not emboldened to make more of these attacks. Hopefully also we'll see China held back by the prospect of a president that they can't who doesn't telegraph weakness. I mean, for all of Biden's bluster, the America never looked weaker than it did after the withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021. And that's one of the reasons we saw the Russian invasion of Ukraine. That's one of the reasons we saw October 7th happen. But now that Trump is coming back into office, hopefully that will send a message to the world. And this was one of the brilliances of his first term, was that nobody knew exactly what Trump was going to do. That's one of the reasons he uses tariffs as a weapon, as a talking point. I think it's brilliant the way he brings it up. And yes, if you were to do smashing tariffs across the board, that could do damage to our economy. But I think what Trump is doing there is he's saying, look, we want to invest in American manufacturing. We want companies to bring jobs back to the United States. And we want to telegraph to the rest of the world that we're not going to be taken advantage of. And that message came through loud and clear in the first 4 years. It's going to be even stronger in this administration.
You know, Joe Paul, Tyler keeps throwing Joe Biden under the bus in his own subtle way.
I do pray for him every night. He is our president.
Oh, yes, afterthought.
I want him to succeed.
Okay. He keeps throwing him under the bus.
Indeed.
You know, this is a new year. And as I said, we're going to start it with the right spirit and the right respect, not taking anything away from Tyler. But it seems as though that the Biden, as he makes these decisions that will impact his legacy, is on a whole different trajectory. I read at the end of last year the harshness of what James Carville had to say about him. It was really tough. What will be his legacy?
Joe Biden's legacy is going to be cemented in that infrastructure bill. He did a pretty good job of redirecting resources to make sure that our bridges are built, make sure that we have internet access, make sure the American people are technologically advanced. And that's really going to be his legacy. I tell you, he could have cemented it, right? Coulda, shoulda, woulda, right? Monday morning quarterback. He could have cemented it by creating an heir apparent and serving as a lame duck 4-year president 4 years ago, and then making sure that we have an heir apparent or succession plan for the Democratic Party. But his legacy is going to be tied into a lot of the bills that he's passed. It's unfortunate that Joe Biden is seen as this someone in the closet, someone in the basement, Sleepy Joe. He's definitely not, right? He's not, right? He's not in the basement either, yes. Right? So, but you know, if you really look at the policies that Joe Biden and his administration has championed, I mean, they've really done a lot for the American people. One thing that I think Trump will have to do is focus on that America first, right? And America first also doesn't mean America only. I think he will definitely be successful if he focuses on taking care of home first before looking at what we can do with foreign policy.
You know, Robert, there's a fact, even for those that may not have supported Trump, the country is unified. Just amazing. And while people, the elite class may do their punditry, the American people want to give Donald Trump a chance. What do you think, if you were advising our president-elect, what would you advise him to do in the first 60 days of his governance?
I think you'd have to start working across party lines. I think that we can't go back to political balkanization and simply say we're going to have one party rule. Let's look at the results of the election. It was an election that came down to 1.6% of the vote nationally. We're talking about, if you look at the swing states, about 700,000 vote difference. If you look at the 3 key blue wall states that would have won the election, it's 100,000 votes that won the election for Donald Trump. So let's not think that this was an electoral landslide and that we should start governing from talking points USA or from a MAGA podcast. You have to reach across party lines and build a cabinet, build an administration that's willing to push forward these types of common sense bipartisan agreements to get things done. People forget that that infrastructure deal was a bipartisan infrastructure deal where Nancy Pelosi had to go around the progressives in their own party who wanted to hold it up in order to have the human infrastructure attached to it and actually have 13 Republicans cross party lines to get those things done. The big things that need to get done in Washington, D.C. can't be done by executive order. They can't be done by judicial fiat. They have to be done across party lines. And with the House of Representatives coming down to potentially one person, a one-vote majority for Republicans, and still needing a 60-vote threshold to get big things done in the Senate, you have to work across the lines. And if it's simply going to be this question of appointing reality TV stars and pushing talking points from MAGA rallies, you're going to see the country fall apart and re-balkanize, which I don't think improves our status.
You know, as we go to break, one thing that is just without question, Donald Trump's success will depend on how well he governs and the successes that he has. If he governs, if he has the respect and the trust, whether it has to do with the economy, whether it has to do with the border, foreign policy, or just healing the nation. The more the American people approve him in their approval ratings, the more it will embolden a Republican Congress, House, and Senate to support him. Because once they begin to see some kind of weakness in that armor, they will begin to cater to their constituency and not to the president. I don't think people should think that just because he has a trifecta, they automatically are going to support him, because if that were the case, John Thune would not be the Senate Majority Leader today. And so I do think that Donald Trump does have an opportunity, but how he governs in the victories and how he works putting Americans first, and he continues to reestablish the trust along our foreign borders, is going to be very critical in the first 60 days to how well he would do it in terms of the American people across the board supporting him, because that will be the fuel that will give him the staying power to continue whatever agenda he has, as long as it's inclusive of everyone, like Robert said. And we'll be back after these messages. Yeah, he has to have the approval rating.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
And welcome back to the broadcast. And due to technical audio difficulties, our chief political editor at the Baltimore Sun will be unable to join us, but we will have her back in the future. Tyler, what lessons can Donald Trump and J.D. Vance learn from the former administration of Biden-Harris that can help them along the way? Because Robert made a very interesting point about when Biden came into office, he had a 50% approval rating. I think the president is probably a little higher, but what can he do to move those numbers?
Yeah, well, I think he's doing a lot already in preparation for the administration to move those numbers. If you talk about bringing Democrats into a Republican administration, Trump has quite a few former Democrats, and some of whom were Democratic until, just yesterday. For instance, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who he tapped to lead the Department of Health and Human Services, which is one of the extremely massive departments of the federal government that has a tremendous impact. I think about Tulsi Gabbard, who he nominated to be his to be at ODNI, the Office of Director of National Intelligence. Trump has already started bringing in a broader coalition. I think in this particular administration, it's broader than it was for his first administration. But I think telegraphing strength, and you're gonna hit me for being harsh on Biden. I do think there are good things that Biden did, but Biden just throughout did not telegraph strength very well. He talked a good game. One of the things I really appreciate about Biden is this point he always brings up. He says, never count America out. Always believe that America will get the job done. That spirit is the thing that I really admire about President Biden. And I think President Trump really embodies the same spirit. And I think he needs to lean in on that more. And I think he's going to, but I think he's following in a way that's going to bring more Americans around. And unfortunately, I agree with Robert. I think there needs to be a disclosure of everything that the federal government has done in the past. That has to be part of this effort to make the administrative state more accountable to the people. And there are a lot of secrets that we still don't know the answers to that I'd really like to see.
Joe, one of the things that we often forget in all this is the spirit of the American people, which is the best part of this country. And when you think about it, people thought that if the election has gone a certain way, we're going to have civil wars and protests and riots and burning, and none of that occurred. And no matter how either side felt, they realized at the end of the day, we are Americans, and the American people have spoken, and let's have this peaceful transition of power. But there's a certain segment of Americans, no matter who's in the White House, they don't benefit. You know, Robin and I have had this conversation in Tyler often. Why is it so many Americans don't vote? Because no matter what promises are made, they never end up changing the circumstances that they find themselves in. So how does a president like Trump and a bureaucracy in Congress change the lives of everyday Americans who continue to struggle and some living in dire poverty?
You have to invite them to the table, right? For far too long, these Americans have been on the menu. When you think about the cuts that are being made, they're going to be impacting a majority of Americans, right? The cuts that are being proposed. You have to invite them to sit at the table. It's difficult to provide answers for a group that you know nothing about. And so D.C. is truly a bubble, right? And the government is a bubble. And so those folks who are living outside the bubble, it's really hard for someone to understand or even empathize with what they're going through. Donald Trump doesn't know how much a gallon of milk costs or how much gas costs. He may know because someone told him, but he doesn't have to worry about how much it costs. And so the majority of Americans who are sitting on the sideline and who are disengaged and disenfranchised is because they've been made promises over and over and over, and none of those promises have been kept. And so you've seen over generation and generation where people continue to vote and then they become apathetic because it's like, well, why should I vote? My vote really doesn't matter. What I believe that the administration needs to do is focus on all politics being local. You have to really, truly implement this trickle-down policy where the things that happen at the White House may not affect you on Main Street immediately, but the things that happen in civic government or local government absolutely depends. Is the difference between whether you have a light post at the end of your block or a covered bus stop or a garbage can at the end of the street. Those things have an immediate impact on your life. So the government's going to have to, and parties are going to have to really focus on the local governments and making sure that they're empowered to empower the citizens. Otherwise, people are going to continue to be disenfranchised.
Robert, is this democracy at a critical point?
We've moved past democracy. I want people to understand that. We've now moved into what political science called a digital technocracy, where instead of decisions being made pluralistically by the people, we very much are moved to a digital oligarchy, where we're simply saying we are outsourcing the needs of government to technocrats and tech billionaires. People like Elon Musk, who literally is a billionaire who was giving out $1 million prizes to people for the election and was running algorithms to where if you clicked on Twitter, it doesn't matter who you follow, you're going to see Elon Musk and MAGA influencers first. Those are the people who are now in charge of deciding what government programs stay and what government programs go. We're seeing that they're entrenching these things within our political and economic system. So the American people have to decide, as Benjamin Franklin said, do we want to keep this democracy? And if so, we have to become re-engaged. We have to get rid of voter apathy. We have to break down the party system that thinks that they tell the voters what they care about as opposed to listening to the needs of the voters. This is one of those dialogues from Plato to Aristotle where they talked about the negative side of democracy being mob rule and being anarchy in many ways. We have to start reestablishing our democratic norms and saying that we're not simply going to sell our government out to the highest bidder, because right now it looks like Elon was able to buy America for less than he paid for Twitter.
But you know, in all fairness, Tyler, Zuckerberg, Dorsey at Twitter, Google were all accused of the same when Trump and Harris were running for president. It's the same. You just kick some out to replace them with someone else. So is that fair? This is what they all try to do. And now all of a sudden, these tech billionaires are trying to get into the good graces of Donald Trump to do his bidding.
Yeah, I think it's important to note, you know, when you're talking about Elon Musk and getting involved behind Trump in this election, that 4 years before that, we saw Mark Zuckerberg pour his own money into promoting, you know, this effort to create mail-in drop boxes that could have swung the election for Biden. But I think the main thing that Robert said that I really disagree with, I mean, it's interesting he cited that quote from Benjamin Franklin, because Benjamin Franklin didn't say a democracy, he said a republic if you can keep it. And there's a very key difference between those two things. And I think one of the main differences between a democracy and a republic is that in a republic, power is divested from the top. You have the situation where the people who are in authority, their goal is to empower those at lower levels of authority. We have a federal system in this country where the federal government does not, or at least should not, handle everything. The states and the local governments should have a big, important say as well. And the reason why we have a republic and not a democracy is that it is oftentimes impossible to have all the citizens agree on one thing and for that thing to actually be good. I mean, as our founders would have cited many times, the Athenian democracy often resulted in very bad decisions where the Athenians, who were mad at a general, would exile a general in the middle of a war, in the middle sometimes of a battle. And so there are limits. At the same time, the will of the people is the main driving force in a republic. And so a republic protects the minority from the passions and the abuses of the majority while giving the majority the rule that it should be due. And so I think that balance is extremely important. I think the United States is far from perfect. I think our government, our federal government, has far too much control. But I do think that the American system is the last best hope of Earth. And I do think that our best days are ahead.
Joe, do you think that in our democracy that it actually works for everyday people, or does it actually work for the establishment and what some call the deep state and those that create wealth as a result of their continuing to control government, no matter who's elected, a Democrat or a Republican? And does that advocate a voice for another party?
Well, it definitely does, and it's been clear. All right, history shows us that it does not. Government doesn't necessarily work for the least among us. And what you're seeing happening, even with President Trump's election, there are a lot of folks who are crossing party lines because they heard a candidate who was speaking to their immediate needs, and they're willing to champion policies that spoke to those immediate needs. You're going to start seeing a lot more folks who divest from being Republican or Democrat or Independent and supporting candidates who are championing policies that impact their day-to-day lives.
Do we have those candidates, Robert?
We do, but with the problem of money in politics. And to Tyler's point, I think that's the definition of a digital technocracy, where we have billionaires simply competing to decide who's going to run the country, what figurehead's going to be there. So whether it's Zuckerberg and Dorsey in 2020, whether it's Elon and Ramswamy and Peter Thiel in 2024, we should all be very concerned by the fact that we've returned to the place we were 120 years ago with robber barons, where Rockefeller and Vanderbilt would decide who the president's going to be, and then another set of billionaires will decide who the next president is going to be.
Let me just tell you this. What a way to start the new year with O'Neill, Joe, and Robert. I mean, in a unified way, wishing well wishes to our president and his administration and to Americans. What a way to start. And we should always, the Bible said, if you find good in something, praise it. That should be a motto for us in 2025. Thank you for joining us for our inaugural edition. I'm Armstrong Williams.